Alright, welcome back, and it's been just over 6 days since I bought this device, and I have to admit, the 8 Elite completely blew my expectations out of the water. I am truly impressed by the performance of this thing. This is a monster. Now, last time I was primarily focused on the default game configuration and the default performance. Again, run perfectly fine. 60 FPS or 120 FPS, depending which one you like. I also did show how the 8 Elite handles a custom configuration file, but today I want to test out the custom configuration performance, because I have a theory that this thing should be able to do 4K 60 FPS or even more without even heating up. Well, I don't want to spoil anything, but this thing is a monster. And it kind of ran the way I expected it to run. Now, of course, besides the 4K custom configuration file, I will show you a bunch of different options that you can use if you want. I also want to show you all the different things that you can do with the overall game and with the frame rate. Now, the most important thing is the custom configuration file that I will be using today. I have been using it for like 2 or 3 months now. I just kept copying, pasting it from update to update. So far it works. I'm using commands that should work years on end, because they're kind of the default Unreal Engine 4 commands that should simply work. There are some commands that sometimes cause issues. I remove those. I would say the safest thing to do is to pretty much go on GitHub and find the original files, because they work 100% of the time. I kind of added a bunch of different things, shadows, reflections and stuff like that, which I think it's missing from the ones that I originally found online. But I recommend, if you want to try this out, to use the one that's available online, because that one is the safest. That will work the best, I would say. I like to play around with this thing, so I usually add a bunch of things, remove a bunch of things. So far, I haven't had issues with this. I have been using a custom file since version 1.3, to be more accurate. So for a long time, and so far absolutely no issues. And I would say it's a huge win for Kuro for allowing this. So far, they have been allowing this, and you can pretty much customize the visuals the way you like. I personally go with quality. I just love how the game looks. I love to have the game as close to PC as possible, and on 8 Elite, I think I pretty much got PC experience on this thing now, which is what I was looking for with the 8 Gen 2. Unfortunately, for the 8 Gen 2 to get the same level of performance and FPS and quality, primarily the FPS though, it needs Vulkan, and the older chipsets will definitely experience a huge boost when Vulkan is added to the game. Now, I have pretty much, I bet you can copy paste it, or pretty much just replace the files. I personally go with copy paste, because I personally think that's the safest way to go, because the original file is still in the game. The original file is still in the assets, so that way there should be no issues with that, because you just add stuff that's already within the game. As I mentioned before, this is not modding. This is basically just recompiling things in a different way, enhancing the resolution and stuff like that, kind of like changing the settings on PC. That's pretty much what this is, although this is not a PC, so you have to kind of do it in a different way. I will use this little cooler that I've been using for the last couple month or two. Truly an amazing little cooler. Works really well, and I kind of don't really need to use the ice block on the 8 Elite. Kind of funny, because the 8 Elite should technically be warmer than the 8 Gen 2, yet this thing runs pretty cold for an 8 Elite. I have zero thermal issues on this thing. Works within its thermal threshold. It has a higher thermal tolerance than the 8 Gen 2, which is a good thing. But yeah, okay, this thing is attached. Let me just add some I'll just use the boxes on the S23 and S25 to just raise this thing a little bit so that the cooler has some air to circulate there. Okay, there we go. That's clumsy, but it will work. Anyway, I'll just enlarge the in-game screen there, because that one is going to be important, because I will show the settings and overall the visuals and stuff like that. I also have, maybe I'll just add some image comparisons, but I don't think image comparison will be needed, because the difference in, you will see what I'm talking about. I'm not going to spoil anything, you will see what I'm talking about. Let me just get my controller hooked up. Okay. Okay, beautiful. There we go. Okay. Now let's focus on the phone screen there. So immediately, if you are familiar with how the game looks by default, the game immediately looks pretty nice. Now, you need to know the resolution scale 0 is pretty much native. This is currently running the game in native 1080p resolution. Setting it at 1 is 720p, setting it at 2 is 2160p. The limit is 3 or 4. I went with 2 at max, although it can go as high as 3 and 4 without much of a problem, but not to do overkill, right? I'll be testing out 0, which is currently the first test that I'll do here, which is native 1080p, 1 720p on 120 FPS, and then we will go 4K with option 2, which will be my target basically. I plan to run the game at scale factor 2, resolution scale 200%, which is 200% of 1080p, which is for 2160p, or in short 4K. Well, yeah, game looks crystal clear, crisp, crystal clear. However, I have to say, with the ultra high resolution option available on the S8Elite by default, I personally didn't really see much of a difference on native 1080p resolution. I started to see a difference once I went with option 2 or scale factor 2, and when I set the resolution at 200%. That's when I would say I started to notice quite a difference in visuals. The game became crystal sharp. It's sharp on default, and on the native resolution it's crystal clear and sharp. On option 2 it's just much clearer, and there's literally no pixelization whatsoever, which was my target. Basically I wanted to see how that will work. Now let's just quickly go back to the configuration, the engine, and primarily to the device profile. That's pretty much where I started to change parameters, because it seems to be much more responsive than on the engine. I would say the device profiling is definitely more important on the hierarchy scale when it comes to files here, because the engine listens to the device profile ini, and if you change the device profile, you pretty much change the engine as well at the same time, without having to go and changing both, to be accurate. Okay, so content scale factor at 0. Let's just go, just to show that this works, I'll set the resolution 15. Now 15, pretty much 15% of native. That's how this works. So that technically this should be 15% of 1080p. It should be pretty blurry, and this serves as a test just to show you that this works, that this is legit, because I know there's a lot of things on YouTube that don't really work. I just want to show that this actually works. So yeah, I don't think I don't need to make a screen. I think there is no need for a screenshot here. I think we can all agree now that this is pretty blurry. This is 15% of 1080p. I can actually make this be a pixel pretty much. If I set 0, it's just a huge pixel, and yeah, it's just pretty weird to look at. But 15% of 1080p, this is how it looks. Just to make sure, just we can agree on that this works. And I also like how the loading screen is still 1080p and sharp, but the rendering is oof. Well, actually, you know what? This is pretty much what PC gaming 2025 looks now. 540p resolution upscaled to 1080p. Oh man. Well, yeah, this is pretty much what the game looks on 15% resolution. And yeah, I love how the game tells me ultra high resolution, yet it's blurry. But yeah, I'll make a screenshot anyway, in case I need to prove a point. But as you can see, this works, okay? It works. And this is a pretty pixelated Zani, not gonna lie. She's pretty pixelated, but she's chilling on the beach. Well, this is her vacation, I guess. A little vacation on the beach here. Anyway, joke aside, let's just go back and let me go here and let's just go back and put this at its. Actually, you know what? Let's just go to 100 and scale factor 2. This is going to be pretty much double 1080p or 2160p or 4K. Again, it can go up, it also can go down. You can scale up the resolution to a certain point, you can also scale the resolution down. It works both ways. The only difference being that you might not notice the resolution scaling up if you don't have a resolution of that aspect ratio, or if you have a 1080p display, you might not see 4K or more. On 1080p you might notice only 1080p at max. However, if you set 2160p you might not see 4K, but the game will look sharper than normal 1080p. That's my experience with overall upscaling and making the resolution higher than what the display is. I've done this on PC, same result, and the same result on mobile, which is again to be expected. But yeah, 4K Wuthering Waves on a mobile device, 60 FPS, no frame drops, and as we will see later on, it can go well over 60 FPS. This thing is a monster. I was pretty surprised that it pulled what it did pull, and I wasn't even able to max out the GPU. Like, this thing doesn't care what resolution I throw at it, it just runs. But yeah, crystal clear visuals, and that combined with enhancing the visuals through a custom configuration file, making the textures a little nicer. You have to keep in mind, this is all already within the game. You're not pretty much modding the game by adding new assets. You're pretty much using the already available assets in a different way, which is fine because you're pretty much still using what the game has to offer. This is what the game has to offer by default. And again, very nice that we do have the option to do that. Okay, that was a relatively long intro. Let the testing. Actually, wait a second. Before the test begin, there is one thing I need to mention regarding the S8 Elite that I've pretty much seen being said on a bunch of other tests. So I've seen claims that the S8 Elite doesn't show the GPU frequency, which is not true. It shows the GPU frequency. However, it doesn't show the way I would like it to show. It doesn't show the third number. It just shows a double digit, but as you will probably see in this video, it still shows the exact number. You just need to add a 0 to the frequency. If it says 44, it's 440. If it says 66, it's 660. If it says 120, that's 1200 megahertz. So it's accurate, and it shows the load, it shows the accurate temperature, it shows pretty much everything. I use applications that pretty much don't affect the performance of the game. I like to show, I've been using these applications for 10 years. They're laser accuracy, and they never failed me. And most importantly, none of these applications mess up the FPS. None of these applications mess up the performance of the device while monitoring the temperatures and load and stuff like that. Now, GPU is 22, which means 220. So pretty much on the GPU, you have to add a 0 on end, and it will pretty much be the exact frequency number that that we need. That's pretty much the only thing that I have a complaint about, but it's not a big deal. It's still accurate and it still shows what it needs to show. I have seen, I think I've looked like thousands of different 8 Elite gameplay videos of Wuthering Waves on YouTube, and all of them, in some way or the other way, show the device lagging and dropping frames. I honestly have no idea how they managed to get 8 Elite to drop frame on this game. I'm perplexed, I'm confused really. Like, I had 0 FPS drops throughout me playing this game and testing the game. Maybe once or twice, but that's because I purposely made it drop FPS. But I'm honestly kind of confused at how these tests show the FPS drops. I kind of have a theory how the application that I've seen most use, the scene, I think that it's called Scene, that application is pretty much hogging one big CPU core at 100% all the time. And this is why I don't use that application, because that application messes up the FPS, because that one core, for some reason, that app just roasts that one core and it doesn't want to let go of that one CPU core, and that drops frames. That's pretty much the reason why I don't like that application, why I don't use it. Because it does that, it affects performance, it pretty much affects FPS, and it doesn't give accurate results. This way that I have, it might appear a little bit messy, but you get true performance and you don't get the applications getting in the way of the performance, and they show real FPS, unaffected FPS. And also, I've seen so many comments claiming 8 Elite GPU is weak because it uses 85% and it drops frames. Meanwhile, where's the frequency? No one shows the frequency of the GPU, which is more important than load, because having 85% GPU load on 220 MHz is not the same as having 85% GPU load on 1.2 GHz. It's a huge difference in wattage, it's a huge difference in performance. And that's a mistake that everyone makes. They just look at load, but they don't look at the frequency, and that's a big mistake in performance testing. You need to look at the frequency. The higher the frequency, the higher the actual load is. Anyway, we will start with the... Well, let's 120 FPS with the frame interpolation, and we are... I think... Yeah, this is 4K. Yeah, this is 4K based on the frequency. GPU is at 960 MHz. Still not maxed out. 120 FPS 4K on a mobile device. I've also seen claims that mobile cannot run the game at 120 FPS. Well, what the hell is this? I mean, I've seen so many claims that are simply not true. I mean, look at the FPS here. Look at the FPS, I guess. A picture tells 1,000 words. Well, if a picture tells 1,000 words, a video tells 1,000,000. It is pretty obvious that the 8 Elite can get this game up to 120 FPS on whatever resolution you want. Because at the end of the day, this game isn't really that GPU demanding. That's the thing. Wuthering Waves isn't a GPU heavy game. It's not really too taxing on the GPU. Which is not a big deal. I prefer that to be that way, because then you pretty much have a wide room for freedom for the GPU to pretty much do whatever you want with it, with the graphics and stuff like that. But yeah, I also set the CPU to light up at the red temperature light up. It's at 85, because that's pretty much the temperature that I want it to light up on. However, the 8 Elite can safely maintain 105 degrees Celsius. Yes, you heard me correctly. The 8 Elite's maximum operating temperature is 105 degrees Celsius. That's warm. For my standards, that's warm, but apparently it's normal for this chip, and it's okay, it's safe for this chip. So the overall temperature is well below the the limit, which means that there should be no throttling. Of course, I can make it throttle manually. I think I'll actually do that later on because I wanted to see if it throttles, how much it will throttle, how much frames it will drop, and it didn't drop much at all. That's the beautiful thing about it. Well, this is on 40 FPS with frame generation on 80. It goes to 80, which is, I would say, a good little balance. Now, if you want 120 FPS, you can go 120 FPS. If you want a more balanced option, I would say 40, that goes to 80 FPS, which is, again, still incredibly smooth, and the temperatures are insane. I mean, when I say temperatures are insane, they're insanely low. For example, if you compare the temperatures on the 8 Elite that I'm getting now, and if we look at my older videos with the 8 Gen 2, you would see the temperatures are pretty much night and day. The 8 Gen 2 CPU did go to 95, 96 degrees Celsius, and it pretty much maintained that value throughout the test. It maintained 95, 85, 95. That's what expected CPU temperature on the 8 Gen 2, and it maintained that temperature for pretty much the whole duration of the test. The GPU was at 81 to 92. 92 was pretty much the maximum I've seen on the 8 Gen 2, maybe 93 in some cases, but 92 was like the peak that I have seen on that thing. The FPS though, that's the big difference. The FPS on the 8 Gen 2 was a little bit all over the place. It went as low as 31, 35. I would say 35 was like the lowest, and it went as high as 70. I think 70 is like the highest that I've ever gotten on the 8 Gen 2, and that's with the frame interpolation or frame generation, but not the built-in. The built-in frame generation is definitely much better than the software one that you get on the device. But yeah, when it comes to performance, a huge difference from the 8 Gen 2. Now the thing is, and why is that the case? A lot of players would assume, okay, that's probably because they optimized the game more for the 8 Elite. Well, not exactly. It's still running in OpenGL, and as I mentioned before, OpenGL will have the same effect on pretty much all. It doesn't matter if it's 8 Gen 1, 8 Gen 2, 8 Gen 3, 8 Elite, doesn't matter. The OpenGL API will have the same effect on all of them. The thing is, this thing has 2 extra large cores and pretty much 6 large cores. The 8 Gen 2 has 1 large core, 5 medium cores, and 3 small cores. In the core configuration, the 8 Elite simply just has much larger cores, much higher power consuming cores, but at the same time much more performant cores, and the frequency is also through the roof on the 8 Elite. But besides that, this thing just has a lot more processing power, and it simply does not have to run that hard in order to get a decent FPS on this game. Meanwhile, the 8 Gen 2 needs Vulkan in order to, and I would say this, most of the devices, doesn't matter if it's 8 Elite or 8 Gen 2 or 8 Gen 3 or whatever chipset it is, most of them on this game will need Vulkan API. Now, I think so far Kura has earned the respect, and they've showed us that they are actively improving the game in one way or the other. They're not like a certain other game company that improves the game just for one specific operating system and for one specific type of devices. I think we all know what game I'm referring to here. A game that I tested out on the 8 Gen 2, comparing it to this game, and this game pretty much just blew it out of the water, as expected. But yeah, Kura actually does seem to understand technology, which is a good thing, and if you have a high-powered device on this game, you will be able to actually take advantage of that power. Unlike a certain other game where this thing, I actually tested in the background the again poo-poo game on this device, and can you believe that that game actually dropped frames on this device. Can you believe that? Like, I'm not kidding. In my hands, I had, I think, 6 different flagship Snapdragon chips: 855, 860, 865, 870, 8 Gen 2, and 8 Elite. 6 of them. All of them run the Gen Pupu game the same way. Can you believe that? Like that's pretty much impossible unless done on purpose, as I like to say. Meanwhile, on this game, you can pretty much see a good chunk of performance improvements with each generation, and obviously, I don't need to mention this. This game is much more demanding than the G game. This game is much more demanding than the G game. It's no denying it. No amount of copium is going to change that. Facts are facts. Not only does this game look better, it runs better, and it's more demanding. And that makes me wonder, how does the G game even have any Android players? Because let's be real, let's be honest. It took them 5 years to add controller support, which on my device does not work because the game gives me your device does not meet the minimum recommended settings or something like that in order to use the controller. Like, are you kidding me? 8 Elite, not requirement, really? And I'll probably have to record that because that's just hilarious. But yeah, I mean, I think we all can agree on that aspect. That's this game is the way to go. I'm not. The G game is bye bye from my point of view. And it's the developers' fault for that. They done that. We, as the player, as the consumer, we just pick the game and the developer that treats us better. It's simple as that. And well, here I am in Wuthering Waves. Doesn't take a genius to figure that one out. Anyway, enough of me getting distracted. So far, I mean, I did set that back to 60 FPS, and CPU is 56, 58. The GPU is at 60, which is honestly, for this resolution, that's insane. 8 Gen 2 would fume at this resolution at 95 degrees Celsius. This little device is simply just running flawlessly smooth, which again, I expected the game to be stuttery. I expected frame drops. I expected the same performance as the 8 Gen 2, but nope. The 8 Elite surprised me, and it surprised me in a very positive way. I'm glad that I bought this device. It's a worthy successor to the 8 Gen 2, I would say. Now, if you were to ask me which device do I like more, the S23 or the S25, actually, I have to say this, but the S23 just feels nicer in hand. Like, the S23 design, yeah, I feel like that's just beautiful. That thing is just beautiful. Glossy frame, it's just beautiful to look at. Very elegant. That thing is just a gorgeous device to look at. I love the 23 design. If I could swap the motherboards, I would, but I can't, unfortunately. I would put the 8 Elite in the S23 if I could. But yeah, if I have to be honest, which device I visually like more, I like the S23 a lot more. It's just a more beautiful phone, more pleasing to look at. Really, like if I can give credit to Samsung, they did a very good job with the S23 series. S25, I don't know. I mean, the 25 it has a good chip, has a very good processor, but that's about it. I mean, I wish that they kept the design from the S23. I just like that one a lot more. But hey, I'll use the S25. It's a good phone. I mean, I cannot complain about it. Well, I have to admit, I cannot complain about it. So it's a monster. Anyway, boss battle time. Well, it's still pretty smooth. Now you might wonder, if you look at the FPS line, you might see those little dips. Now, are those true frame drops? Well, I wouldn't call them frame drops. I wouldn't call them. It's not a stutter. It's not a exact frame drop. I just set the update interval to be very fast, so that I can keep a close eye on rendering, and just to see if there's any inefficiencies in rendering. And pretty much the little dips ups and down, that's pretty much the inefficiencies in rendering, which is fine. Again, OpenGL. But if I were to set a normal update interval, it would be 60, 61, 59, which is pretty much flat line 60, and I have no complaints about the performance so far. The heat output is phenomenal. Quite literally, I mean, this thing is ice cold pretty much. You don't really need a lot. I was surprised about this. You really don't need a lot of cooling to keep the 8 Elite cooled. This thing again is designed in such a way that it has a very high thermal threshold, and even with such a high thermal threshold on this game, this thing doesn't seem like it is heating that much. Now, the cooler that I have attached might help a little bit. However, from my personal experience, the 8 Gen 2, for example, I wasn't able to maintain this temperature. The heat will win eventually. That's the thing. I can maintain the frame cold, but I am unable to maintain the internal temperature cold pretty much. And even with the cooling, the 8 Gen 2 was still running pretty warm. With the same setup, pretty much with the same cooling, the 8 Elite here doesn't seem to really warm up much, and I have to say that's probably because the chip isn't really working that hard. It doesn't really need to work that hard because, again, 8 big cores. Out of those 8, 2 are super large big cores or extra large. I don't know how they call them exactly, but it doesn't really need to do much in order to get very good performance. So at the end, it doesn't really heat up that much, despite all the rumors saying that 8 Elite runs really warm. If it were running really warm, this test would have showed it, because the 8 Gen 2 technically draws much less power, yet it heats up a lot more than the 8 Elite. Based on this test, you can go back, look at 8 Gen 2 tests, and you will see that the temperature on that is much higher than the temperature on this thing right now, on the same settings. And obviously on the same resolution. Because we are currently playing at 4K. I have to remind that this is 4K resolution currently. Scale factor 2, resolution 20%. There are some spikes though, that's for sure. In some instances you will see the CPU temperature go up, but that quickly does go down at the same time. So that's what I'm saying. It doesn't really work that hard. Oh, actually, you know what? I said 120. I turned on the frame generation. Frame generation does put the GPU to a little bit more stress, but still, it's well under the thermal threshold. It does hit 92 occasionally, but that's only through loading, and that's again far from 100 degrees Celsius. So that's pretty good. Okay, well, so far, I mean, I'm not only happy, I'm extremely happy about the performance that I got out of this thing. I'm pretty happy about how the 8 Elite runs. Well, I mean, I was wrong. I will admit, I will be the first one to admit, I said that 8 Elite is not going to perform any better than the 8 Gen 2. I take that back. I take that back. I don't know if it's just... I don't know if it's the new update that made it that good, because I didn't have the 8 Elite before 2.3. But as of now, I will say 8 Elite works much better than the 8 Gen 2, and I would say probably works much better than 8 Gen 3. Difference is pretty big. But I would say the most important difference here is definitely the heat output, because I know a lot of you guys are worried about the heat output, and maybe this test will kind of put that worry to rest, because if there is anyone who stresses their devices to the limit, it's me. If you watch the previous tests, you know I do some crazy stuff with these things, with these phones, and on the 60 FPS option, 4K, on the 8 Elite, on the S25, I don't have any major heat outbursts or any heat at all. This is insanely cold for a passively cooled chip, and that's impressive. This is impressive. I am impressed. Did I expect this? Nope. I expect this thing to run 100 degrees Celsius constantly, but it doesn't, which is a pleasant big surprise. But as I mentioned before, we will be doing a bunch of testing today, and I'm doing a thorough test showing all sorts of different options that you can do. I mentioned that on the very start of this video today. But yeah, this was the first part was 4K or 2160p, scale factor 2, resolution scale 20%. The next will be scale factor 1, resolution 100%, which will mean that the game will come down to 720p. I was interested, okay, if I put the resolution to 720p and if I enable frame generation, right, what will the heat output be? Is the heat output going to be the same as 4K 60 FPS? Because if that's the case, well, that's going to be my preferred option, because 120 FPS with zero heat on this game, yes please. Although I can do standard 120 FPS, that works as well, but I like to have my visuals a little bit enhanced, you know. Alrighty then, so should be scale factor 1, 720p. Hopefully I did not mess up the overall lineups of the video. I tend to do that, but frame interpolation is enabled, and GPU is 960 MHz. Yeah, it's getting pretty warm. Okay. Well, this could very well be even more than... Actually, let me go back and put that back. Yeah, I think I messed up my lineup again. If you had to guess what this scale factor is, what do you think? Since I'm not recording, obviously, I mean, when I record the screen, yeah, this is scale factor 300%, I believe. Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, I don't need to say anything. I mean, it still runs very, very good. Now, I actually did the test before to see what's the maximum resolution that you could technically upscale to. I think the maximum was like 4360p or something like that, which is 8K approximately. But I don't really think it does get that high. I think 0, 1, 2, and 3 work for the most part. 4, I think 4 does not work. because I didn't see any significant performance impact on the 8 Gen 2 on 4. Although I tried all sorts of different options, and I am convinced that there is definitely a certain limit as to how much you can go high with the resolution. But I would say 2 is still overkill for most devices. If you have a 8 Elite tablet, you can go with 3, but at the same time, option 0 is going to give you native resolution, so you can use 0, and if you have a, let's say, 2160p display, it will scale up to 2160p and you will get default 4K resolution without having to do all sorts of writing with the numbers. So kind of going above 3 is a bit pointless. I mean, even 2 is a bit pointless for a lot of devices, but it's important to know what you can do with the numbers. Well, yeah, this is, I think this is 2160p, again 4K, or more, even higher than that actually. I think I've set it at 3, and I can definitely tell you that the overall visuals look sharper, and it still runs perfectly fine though. The temperatures are a little bit higher than on the previous 2160p option, which is to be expected. Technically higher than 2160p at the moment, should be. But let's do a boss battle. That's what I'm curious about. All in all, this is still some pretty impressive FPS, and we are still not pushing the chip to its absolute limit. GPU is at 830 MHz, which is about 45 to 50% of total usage. So yeah, it can still push 120 FPS. That's the scary part. It can still push 120 FPS. Which I kind of wanted to go, but at the same time, I don't really want to torture this device too much. It's still relatively new. I want this thing to live a long, hopefully a long life. And this is also a thing that you can do with the frame generation. You can set 30 FPS and then turn on frame generation. However, I don't really feel like I don't feel like this to be as smooth as a true 60 FPS. I would say that the best balance between FPS and power usage is definitely 40 with the frame generation on. I think 40-45 is like the desired limit to get decent and smooth experience with the frame generation. 30 to 60 works, and it's generally smooth, but it feels rough. It definitely feels rough, and the frame generation isn't as smooth as it would be on 40 FPS. 40 is definitely the sweet spot that if you want to use frame generation and if you don't want to pretty much go and roast the chip, then 40 with frame generation is the way to go. 80 FPS would be the desired number, and honestly that's still pretty decent. However, if you just want native performance, then 60 without any frame generation is still perfectly doable and extremely stable. So that's also an option that you can choose. Okay, so I played around with that option, and now let's actually play around and do 120 FPS. But on 720p. Let's see how the heat output will look now. I'm personally very interested to see how this will look. Obviously, on 720p, you might notice a little bit blurring, a little bit of pixelation and stuff like that. But if you're using a custom configuration file, you can actually adjust the temporal anti-aliasing or the anti-aliasing in general to kind of mask that. And I think in theory, it is also possible to make the upscaler do the job and pretty much upscale from 720 to 1080p, which is something that I haven't managed to get the game to do yet, because it's still when you do and when you add option 1, it seems that the game turns off the upscaler and it just goes to default native rendering. It runs 720p, doesn't want to upscale, but if it were to upscale, it would be the perfect option. It would be the perfect option basically. 720 upscale to 1080p with some good sweet old frame generation means the heat output will be even less and the performance will definitely increase a lot. And this is probably going to work the best and benefit best the lower end or the older generation Snapdragon flagships and other chips, mid-range chips as well. I would say frame generation is definitely going to be important for this game on mobile. And I'm not a big fan of frame generation, but in this case, I would say it's actually done right. Like, I don't feel any delay, or if there is a delay, it's pretty much minimal because I use a Bluetooth controller, so I'm already with a delay. But overall, the image quality and all that, it's flawless. I mean, I don't see any difference in image quality. It does a very good job with that, that's for sure. Well, it's pretty much what I expected, actually. 720p, 120 FPS. CPU is at 62, GPU is at 64, or 60 to be more accurate. 0 frame drops and 0 heating, flawless 120 FPS performance. And you know what, I might as well keep this option because I like how this runs. We have managed to drop the GPU usage by 30-40%, which is impressive. Impressive drop in GPU usage, which is good because less heat. And the overall, I mean, I see the low resolution is definitely not as good looking as 1080p or 4K. That's a fact, but honestly, the difference isn't that significant unless you go look at the display up really close. This will be noticeable if you're playing through a desktop mode. If you hook up the phone to a big monitor, you will notice a big difference. That's a fact. But on a smaller display, and if you're playing normally, you will not see a big difference, but you will feel a huge improvement in thermals and the overall frame rate will definitely be very good as well. Now I'm actually managing to cool the device down, which is funny. Yep, this is pretty much no frame drop whatsoever. I love this. Beautiful. Now, if only this was available on the 8th Gen 2. That's the thing that's bugging me at the moment, 8th Gen 2, 8th Gen 3, and all the Snapdragon chips support the motion engine, or they all have frame generation pretty much built in. They support it. And if there is one thing Kuro should do at the moment is make this available to all of them. To all of them that support it. Apple chips don't have this. It's funny. I mean, I'm back at the G game again. Look at the G game on an Apple device and look at the G game on an Android device. The difference is night and day. And at the same time, look at Wuthering Waves on Android and look at Wuthering Waves on iOS. The Android version of this game looks better. and at the moment runs better as well. Even though it runs better even with a outdated API. I would be scared if I had an Apple device, because this is some pretty scary performance. Apple uses Metal, which is pretty much the equivalent of Vulkan. This uses OpenGL, an API that's 20 years old and that's not usable for this game. Yet, despite that, it still runs better. Apple has frame drops on this game. Drops, not I would say not serious frame drops, but it drops from 60 to like 40, 45, 48. It drops, and it definitely, you can feel the drops. They're not significant, they're not huge drops, but you can feel the drops. This thing does not have any frame drops. And I've seen also comments in the past. I've been reading comments that Apple runs this game at a high resolution. Well, about that, 4K that we tested earlier, native 4K, by the way. It's not upscaled 4K. Oh no, native. We're talking about native performance. Apple chips would burn a hole in the ground if they run this at native 4K. But anyway, let's do some boss battles. Let's have some fun with bosses. And this is the thing. The SD8Elite is currently like the most powerful mobile chip, and the SD8Elite pretty much at the moment blows all the other chips out of the water. Like, I'm truly impressed by this thing. I'm truly impressed by how good this thing runs. And yeah, boss battle, the temperatures normally, as expected, will be a little bit higher. But it is still much better thermals than what we have seen earlier. And also I almost forgot, I will have to account that I used the recorder. I used the recorder in the last test. When I recorded, the recorder does do weird things with CPUs for whatever reason. It does the same thing with 8 Gen 2. It did the same thing with 870. It does the same with the SD8Elite. My recorder is weird, and my recorder just heats up phones for no reason. So the extra heat that came in the last bit of test, it was from my recorder. I forgot to mention that. I was carried away by other things, but yeah, the recorder is pretty much to be blamed for the extra heat. Now it's decent. Yeah, still much better thermals than on the 8 Gen 2, and overall better thermals than on the previous scale factors, which is to be expected. Well, let's just play around a little bit more. Why not? I'm actually having a blast playing this game. The main problem why I did not enjoy this game on a mobile device is definitely the heat output and the frame rate. This is pretty much the reason why I pushed for Vulkan so much. I still do push for Vulkan, because this is just proof of everything I talked about in the past. Like, if we had Vulkan support, this is pretty much how the game would run on 80% of mobile devices. Mid-range, high-end, doesn't matter. This is how the game would run. This is pretty much the performance that you can expect on Vulkan. This is an SD8Elite, obviously, so it's a pretty much an overkill chipset, but at the same time, kind of proof that this game definitely needs still more work on the softer side. And honestly, I used to be pretty mad that we didn't get Vulkan in the past, and I probably still am mad about that, because my 8 Gen 2 lived through its entire life cycle without ever experiencing proper Vulkan API on a bunch of different games. And that's pretty sad, because that thing's GPU is still unused, by the way. But with Wuthering Waves and where Kuro is going right now, I do have high hopes that we will see that very soon. Frame generation, well, is kind of proof of that, because frame generation on mobile, I think that they're one of the first ones that done that. Definitely something that you will never see on Android, on Genshin version of Android. That game will maybe get frame generation in 2035, according to the current tempo that they have with adding simple features like controller support and upscalers, which still lack on that game, will lack forever. That game is just, I completely understand why players compare Wuthering Waves with Genshin so much. Like, and honestly, they asked for it. I mean, they asked for it, and now when Wuthering Waves is actually doing much better, well, that's just how a free competitive market works. The better game will produce happier players, and more players will go to the better game. I would say Genshin has like, I don't know, that game is sinking like a Titanic right now. So I don't wanna doom post too much about that, but that game is, as my friend said, that game is dead, and it's sad, but we can't do anything about it. That's just how Mihail wanted to do it, so it's, let them do their thing, I guess. At the end of the day, we have our Wuthering Waves, the game that we enjoy more, and the game that actually is, I would say, fun. I have more fun in this, so yep, no need to. I might compare the 8 Elite performance on this game and on Genshin just for fun at one point, but currently I just want to enjoy this game as much as I can. But let's do a little bit more. Let's do a couple more balls, but also, I mean, the frame rate was stable. I mean, it's just insane what you can do with the options with this game. Like, being able to just customize it the way you like it. If you want quality, you can go quality. If you want FPS, like I did right now. Technically, I mean, in this case, this is quality combined with FPS at the end of the day, because I just changed the resolution of the game. The rendering resolution has been reduced. Everything else pretty much the same. Shadows and stuff like that is still the same, and pretty much just that little change made the thermals a lot better. And again, I focus on thermals so much because on the 8 Gen 2 I didn't like that chip went so warm, even though 95 was the limit for the 8 Gen 2. That's the optimal temperature for it. For the 8 Elite it's 105, yet it doesn't go anywhere close to that, which is a good thing. And I am personally pretty happy with the results that I've seen so far. From this point on, it can only be better. I also expect ray tracing support in 2.4, 2.5. My estimate, we will see ray tracing on Android, on mobile in general. We will see ray tracing, and I want to see how that will perform. But so far, I'm personally blown away by this chip. It did an amazing job, and with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this rather lengthy testing video. As I mentioned before, when I test stuff, I test stuff properly, and I kind of want to show what the game can do, and pretty much I wanted to see how the game will behave on a 8 Elite, because I've seen so many tests. I just wanted to see. I just wanted to see stuff for myself. I wanted to see what's true, what's false, what works, what doesn't work. And for the most part, honestly, I am more than happy. Obviously, I will continue testing. The testing never stops, as I mentioned before. If some issues pop up with the game, I'll be probably one of the first ones to mention it, because again, I can smell every little problem in the code that the game can have. Again, I've been doing this for years and years now, not only with this game but other games, so kind of have experience with this. So in general, my not exactly my job, my hobby, although I like to say it's my duty as a content creator to actually help other players, and maybe this helps you decide what kind of phone you want to buy next, or maybe this decides whether you want to save for the next generation, or if you want the earlier generation, or if you want to find something that works best for you at the end of the day. But with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this. As I mentioned before, this rather lengthy video. I personally enjoyed making it, and well, with that being said, hope you guys found the information here useful at the end of the day. That's also a thing I aim for. I want this to be useful, so that we have some accurate information on what the game does in the background, what the game does with the overall CPU, GPU, and just to shed some light on the actual thing performance-wise on the chip itself. Because again, this is the way proper performance testing should be done. When you test something, you should make sure that you have all the possible parameters, important parameters, lined up, all the temperatures, frequencies, loads, so we can see what works, how much it works, the way it works, and that way we can also figure out what's lacking and what doesn't lack and things like that. And well, with that being said, stay safe. If you want to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe. As always, I'll see you next time.